Today we're talking about Errant Knights, the Nomad Pacts of the Sabbat, a Storyteller's Vault title by the delightful and talented Sebastian Freeman.
Yeah, friend of mine.
And so this book, pretty much what it's about is in the title. It's about nomadic packs. So it's presented as a Black Dog Game Factory book. So do you have opinions about that before we really get into like the content of this material? Like,
wait a minute.
When I ask
is
you,
it a Black Dog book? I know it's
that's what it's.
Road.
Yeah. So I don't know what the Year of the Road is because
we'll put that on a shelf for now. Is it a Black Dog book?
So it's listed as a Black Dog book, and the author touches on that a little bit inside this book.
I think it's that.
Yeah, in the first couple of pages, on page 9, he talks about the Black Dog and mature content.
So I was going to let you kick this one off because reasons, but let me just go ahead and say that. So no, it shouldn't be a Black Dog book in my opinion. I think that's an errant label. Aha!
I appreciate that the storyteller had the presence of mind to put that label on there. But I don't feel that any of the material in here in any way, shape, or form is Black Dog. I feel like it is no more Black Dog than any of the other Sabbat material that's ever been presented. And quite frankly, the previous material like Sabbat Guide, remember the Camarilla and the Sabbat books from Revised, like this book is a presentation about nomadic packs in the Sabbat. And I feel very presented in a very in a way that is very indicative of how the author sees them. I think in that regard, yeah, it does give us some information about the Sabbat, about nomadic packs, and a little bit of information about like different ways that you can play it. So the first chapter, obviously, we're not going to go over like all the author intro stuff. Like it is what it is. It's Sabbat. It's meant to be about nomadic packs. The first chapter gives us examples on different styles of nomadic packs that one could play or that a group could play. And I think that those concepts are pretty cool, especially for people that are not necessarily familiar with the Sabbat. All those things being said, like that is basically what the chapter is. It gives you a selection of different ideas on nomadic packs. How about you? What did you have to say about that first chapter?
I really liked it. I felt like it redefined who the Sabbat are as playable characters for most people. For me, it I don't think redefined is the right term. I think it clarified, for me at least, the vision of what I think the Sabbat looked like. I had grown up like most with the Lost Boys and that sort of thing. And as much as we argue about whether they're Ravnos or whatever, I always kind of consider them to be sort of Sabbat-like. And I felt like you couldn't do that for long. Like that gig is up. So if you were a vampire and you did act like the guys from the Lost Boys, you would move on. And you would be kind of like a roaming serial killer band thing. I don't know. And for that reason, I was very attracted to this book. I felt like it sort of explored the Lost Boys, kind of. There's a lot of reasons why packs like this would exist and how they would interact with the Sabbat in general, because the Sabbat is, of course, a very large, sophisticated organization that does not necessarily move around. They have defined territory. And so the nomadic packs interact with the static packs. I don't know. I liked that they talked about how nomadic packs are distrusted, how nomadic packs are often made up of people who got in trouble and had to bounce. They're still part of the Sabbat, but they're moving around. I like how it gets into that nomadic packs often beef with each other for many of the aforementioned reasons, like, hey, weren't you part of that one thing and you were there, and suddenly you have Sabbat versus Sabbat violence. And I really enjoyed the dynamic between the sort of lowly shovelhead sort of Sabbats that must populate these nomadic groups and the powerful established elite. I think I've said it twice now, but yeah, I loved it. I thought it was a really well done chapter. that I didn't really have any. I mean, I'm trying to think of something that I don't like about it.
I feel like very quickly I am going to develop a reputation as the guy who's never satisfied, and I don't want people to get that impression. Here's where I go, I kind of agree with you on this chapter. This chapter, my complaint on this chapter is it was not enough. I think more time could have been spent on the intricacies of the nomadic pacts. And here's why. Because I feel like, truth be told, this is the only part of the book that actually lives up to the title of the book. I think that the other chapters are really not at all about nomadic pacts. They're vaguely related to the nomadic pacts of the Sabbat, but truly they are a departure. Here's what I realized while I was reading this. We didn't need a book about nomadic pacts for V20, for Storyteller's Vault. We need an update on the Sabbat book as a whole, because there is no update on the Sabbat book for V20. There's no Camarilla update either. It's just what's in the it's just what's in the V20 book, and then the various stuff that is, presented in Rights of the Blood and stuff like that. But there is no actual update. And so a lot of the stuff that's in here, while it would be pertinent to the game setting, I don't feel like there was enough information about the Sabbat as a whole to warrant a book specifically about nomadic pacts, but also I don't think that that's what we got here. That having been said, I am not condemning this book. I'm not saying I hate this book or even that I dislike this book. It's just, for me, that's something I really wish more time had been spent about the Sabbat as a whole, so that the idea and concept of nomadic pacts could be placed in a way that people understand it. Because I don't really think, if you're a newcomer to V20, I don't really think there's going to be enough presented about the Sabbat in the V20 book for most people to go, oh, I get it. I think it's presupposing a bunch of knowledge that was acquired in earlier editions that isn't available in the 20th anniversary edition. So that's my only complaint. First chapter needs to be longer.
I had to fan myself off because it's getting hot here with that hot take, bro. So, my singed fingertips aside from handling that hot potato, you have some really good points. So I'm going to concede that, which I didn't actually realize, that V20 doesn't have an update to the Sabbat that really ports into pack life. It's established that packs are a thing for the Sabbat in V20, but I have this knowledge from Revised and from 2E, and I would struggle, because I haven't read the V20 books in their entirety in any recent time frame like you have, to say with definity that, oh yeah, well, you could totally read the section on the Sabbat in V20 and blah, blah, blah. I just didn't realize that. I can't argue with that point, because I would have to go back and check my V20 book, which is behind me. Mm-hmm. And so I have no argument for that. That's a fascinating take that I straight up didn't consider. So that's an important point I have to concede, because someone could have come into the game in V20 and for whatever reason not really gotten into the Sabbat, and then decides to buy this book, and they could be, somewhat confused. He had his own ignobilis Rita rights, for me at least, because it's been a while since I actually played the Sabbat. I had, I guess, forgotten that there are two types of Rita, and that there's the Octurus, which is practiced throughout the pack, or throughout the sect, and that you do this with the established covens. And then there are pack rites, which are very often morphed from, what society you're from, or, whatever places you've been in. And they are more specific to the pack than the Octurus Rita. And for that reason, you can develop your own ignobilis Rita. And I had also only recently been reminded by you on this show that the Vinculum and the other Sabbat rites are actually diluted blood magic, and they have real effects. I mean, obviously, but you kind of forget about their importance, or at least I did. Right. And so his use of these I think kind of maybe OP'd. Ignobilis Rita was really interesting. It completely altered my view of the Sabbat. I just forgot, I guess, that the Rita is a thing, and that rites can be constructed. You can get benefits from rites. That's what the priest does. I mean, I loved this book so much, and it just, I think, again, maybe because I forgot things, or maybe because I had knowledge from previous editions, but it really, really put the Sabbat together for me in a way that I guess I hadn't thought about them like that in a long, long time.
If this book provided you with that, then it's already hit its mark. If you just reading this is like brought you back to that, like, oh, this is why I like the Sabbat, this is stuff I forgot, then it's done its job. Ignobilis Rite, I think are awesome. Anytime you can bring, Rite that is of the ignoble variety and add that flavor, that spice to your stew, I'm all for it. In fact, this is part of that. I wish there was more. There can be a lot more. There can be more provided. I just wish it had focused more on this stuff. Moving on to the next chapter. I don't want to go too deep on this because, this isn't about books that we don't like. This is about books that we think add something to your table. So I don't want to get too shitty on this, but I just feel like the writer of this book and I have a very different opinion on humanity. And some of this chapter I super disagree with. Some of it I don't, but I feel like specifically there's a section called Seminarium Rite. I'm not having any of that. I don't want anything to do with any of that. So, not to belabor the point, not to go too deep, like I said, I think some of the things that the author has done with transitions to passive enlightenment and things like that are good. I think that they are valuable additions, but some of them I don't.
The themes of this book are a little muddled. By the time it gets to whites, you're kind of wondering why you're there. I know personally why he did that, and so it makes sense to me. But I can see why you're saying, well, what about being nomadic? Nomadic makes me have to talk about this. I get that it's a Sabbat thing, but nomadic. So yeah, I actually feel you on that one. But going back, you're talking about the Seminarium Rita. Those are like demoralizing activities that your priest can give you so that you can break through the low levels of humanity into the low levels of the new path of enlightenment that you're on. And so they're unique to the different path of the blood, path of Cathari, path of Caine. They all have different activities that your priest would give you. I found those to be utterly fascinating. They made a lot of sense and also seemed like they're all quick starts. Those are all like adventures.
Having things like this in the book, I think they're cool. And I think that they're cool because they will give players and storytellers ideas about transitioning from humanity and to the rigid structure of a path of enlightenment. For that purpose, I do think that they're cool. So I don't want to take anything away from that. I think it can definitely be an invaluable tool, but just for my personal preference, not something I'd use. This is a small chapter on the who, what, where, when, and whys of becoming a white, which, interestingly enough, I could not find a single mention of the term white. That's W-I-G-H-T. It's on the screen here. It's on the screen here. I just put it there. There's no mention of that term in the V20 book that I could find at all. And it's interesting when you start to really dig through some of these books, looking for some of this past information, it's startling how much is actually not included in a book that's like this thick. They do talk about losing your humanity and being unplayable, but they don't give any further information on that. The real deal info on falling to the wassail, becoming a white, you really got to go back to the revised edition for info on that. Mm-hmm. So, and here's the thing. What really kind of shit the bed for me on this book was, again, I was like, there needs to be more information for this edition that was never provided. And it's great that it's in here, but stuff like this, I think, deserves a place in a book that's more thematically consistent with paths in humanity. It just made me want to go grab or Chaining the Beast, which again it's not an indictment of this author. It's just a failure of the 20th anniversary edition. at providing the material that is needed. Like I said, I think it's great that the writer included this stuff. It made me want a book on spirituality for V20. But also, I felt like you had felt when you had talked about it, like, why are we here, kind of. Yeah, we get it. Like, it happens to the best of the Sabbat, but it also happens to the worst of them.
I was a little confused as to why the whites were part of the nomadic tribes book. But really, it seemed like there was a subtext that nomadic tribes more often than not end up as whites, and that this is just a fairly common thing for them, and that also they're often used to hunt them down.
Then the next that's presented is the Jay and Silent Bob's Secret Stash, the disciplines, merits, and flaws. And then there, I don't know if there's anything that stuck out to you in the disciplines. There's a couple, and here's a big pet peeve of mine that this one doesn't do. I do not like it when books, especially Storyteller's Vault material, are just like filled to the brim with disciplines and merits and flaws. What I mean is, like, this is we're on page 40. This is like basically like a 50-page book, and there's 4 discipline powers in there. And I think that that is an appropriate amount of discipline powers. What I find complain worthy is when there's like 30, different powers and da-da-da-da-da. That's a little too much for me.
I remember when you reviewed Clan Book Theocratic, and you and your partner at the time were very gracious. You gave me a great review, but I do remember the comment that you made. I don't remember the comment, but just in general, and other people made that there was a lot of disciplines. Like, it was a 110-page book with 50 pages of, and it was difficult to rework all of the Mythosyria and work in necromancy, and I did rituals, and I shouldn't have done all that. I don't know what I should have done. I should have maybe, like I suggested, the Clan Book Gargoyle should have done 2 books or something. But yeah, I hear you, man. That's a really great critique to hear, because I need to hear it personally as an author more, that you don't need to dump disciplines into a book to make it qualify as good. You can hear it.
Last but not least, we have a nomadic pack that's presented at the end.
I don't have any particular comments about the pack at the end, to be honest. I really like the pictures that he used. We're slipping into the critical
section.
Yeah, I didn't have a problem with this pack. I thought it was generic. I didn't really like their names, but I never really liked the Sabbat names. They always have such funky names. You're like, God, it's so weird and cheesy.
Yeah.
So you had one named Freshman, and I'm like, yeah. So that's kind of it for me. I thought it was a really good book, but I think it had some flaws from being a Year of the Road book. That would pretty much be how I would do it. But what do you have to say?
The Photoshop on this book is not great. In fact, it's pretty inconsistent across the board. Colors are different, and shadows are different, and a lot of the text doesn't show up well. And small other little critique, there's way too much reliance on white text on black backgrounds. So I didn't read any of the fiction in here because I just couldn't bring myself to read that because it hurt my eyes. Other than that, I feel like I've already said all the bad things that need to be said about this book. So I'm just going to wrap it up there. That's my critical impression.
I'm looking at the chapter heading titles, or just introduction, or whatever has blood splattered on it.
Right.
And I see what you're saying. You're right. It is difficult to read. I don't feel like the white on black is that hard to read, but I'll be really honest. I struggle with all of the introductory fiction of late because it's written in that cursive font.
There is a lot of really good story elements in this book. It's very well written. Like the author is a good writer. I've read some shit and I've read some good, and he's a good writer. I think that, my big issue is just our sort of perspective disagreements on what the Sabbat is, what humanity is, but there's still elements in there that spur thoughts for gameplay. So, I got to give it appreciation for that.
How many drops of blood would you give this? How many blood points would you drain from the author?
Only 3. I want them to live.
All right. I really like the book. I definitely recommend buying this book. I do see Nate's point that you kind of already need to know about the Sabbat for it to be relevant. But I think that's everybody, or 80+% of the people that play this game. So that was an interesting revelation. As I always do, I texted you, through the week. Hey, I love the book. What do you do? And you're like, hey, yeah, read the book, And I was like, what the fuck? And then when you mention the issues, I get it. Like, I'm like, all right, I see what you're saying. But I don't think any of that adds up to, and I don't think you do either, to it being a bad book at all. I think it's a great book. I think it suffers from having been put out quickly for being a year of the road. I think it suffers from being a relatively unprofitable type of book. It's a source book. Like, nothing's gonna, only Sabbat people are really gonna be like, oh, look at that Sabbat book, man. I don't know how many it sold. I'm not into that, but I think it suffers from not being an official canonical book. And if this was an official canonical book, it would have been longer. It would have had better art. The layout would have been done properly. And for what it's worth, I think a lot of the content would have been preserved. I think it was really well thought out. Even if you don't, which is fine, I think if this were canonical, it wouldn't be that much different. It'd be like twice as long, and it would have better art, and it would have maybe better layout. But I think it has a great name. I think it has a great theme. But I'm a little confused by its transition into Clan Book White. But I see how it's relevant in the context that, assuming this is a correct reading of the book, that whites kind of are generated in a consistent fashion from nomadic packs. So whites and nomadic packs kind of go hand in hand. And so for that reason, I dig it.
Of course, as always, make sure that you check out the podcast on utilitymuffinlabs.com or wherever you get podcasts for our full conversation. I don't know how long this video is because I haven't edited it yet, but this is an hour-long conversation, and I guarantee you it won't be an hour long on YouTube. So check it out, listen to the whole thing, tell us what you think. If you agree with us, come and co-sign. If you disagree with us, tell us in the comments, and we'll be happy to chat with you down below. So thank you. All right, everybody, take care. Bye-bye.